Star Wars The Acolyte review. This might just be of the first season. Right now it's unclear if there will be more than one season, but yeah. If something changes in one of the following seasons, if we get them, I might do another video. Just be aware if you're watching this some point in the future, somewhat I say might change in some way in a later season. So this will have spoilers for everything Star Wars leading up to, but not including this show. I will not be spoiling anything about this show at any point in this video. The show is rated TV 14, or at least some episodes are, so might this video be. And yeah, I really love this show. With these Star Wars properties, you know, we've seen in recent years they try to come up with something that's new and interesting rather than just reiterating, you know, sequel trilogy didn't do a wonderful job at that, but it was trying. Everything Disney Star Wars has at least tried. And this tries to add some moral gray. You know, it's somewhat following the lead of the prequel trilogy, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I do think this was a quite good element of questioning, you know, maybe the Jedi, you know, maybe they're not perfect. And, you know, yeah, basically the prequels, you know, introduce this idea and go, you know, do travel some with the, yeah, with it, and then this one just, you know, takes it and absolutely runs with it. Basically, we get exploration of how the Jedi, as has been pointed out, you know, by a number of people, they're kind of a cult, you know. They're this, you know, isolated religious group that, you know, raise children and have a very, yeah, these very strict rules. And yeah, this is as cult-like as we've seen Jedi in a live-action official, you know, thing. And I don't think they push it so far that we end up feeling like, well, this is just inconsistent with other media. You know, they make sure to be careful to not push it into that. And yeah, there's a lot of moral gray going on in this show. I got very much a noir vibe. I've seen, I think it was maybe Movie Bob who said that it felt very wuxia. I see that in the action scenes. I have to admit, it's been too long since I watched anything wuxia. I did watch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but that was like 20 years ago. I remember the action. I don't remember enough about like themes and such. But, you know, I agree with a lot of what Movie Bob says. But yeah, so, yeah, very, very, I'm going to focus on the noir aspect, what I recognized and what I saw with, you know, you outright have like some shots that feel like right out of like Star Wars noir, Noir Wars, Star Wars, Noirs, and yeah, it's wonderful. And it's one of those things, you know, I know some people might brace at that, but let's keep in mind, Star Wars has always taken inspiration from a lot of different things. You know, I've heard a number of people refer to Star Wars as science fiction, and I am a little bit too much of a nerd to let that one completely go. It is technically weird Western. You know, not just that Han Solo stepped right out of a Western into Star Wars, but you have a lot of elements from classic Westerns, you know. And yeah, others have done detailed videos talking about how Star Wars is a weird Western. And I'm not saying weird as like a derogatory. That is the term for the genre, Weird West. Weird West, Weird Western, something like that. But yeah, and you know, with Jabba you have some Godfather going on, and yeah, this is the first time they've, you know, deep dived into noir. Attack of the Clones dips its toes in it, and right, and some of the shows, some of the animated shows, I believe, also have some noir stuff. But I mean, live action. This is the first time they've gone quite this deep on it, and yeah, you know, you have shots with like what are those called? The curtain, yeah, the light coming in through those curtains where you can see like little beams of light in between the little shutters. Is that what they're called? You know, and yeah, like it's a show where I'm not sure I would say that there's necessarily particularly good guys or bad guys. There's shades of gray to everyone, and there's definitely some that we might perceive more as antagonistic and others less antagonistic, but yeah, at the end of the day, you know, it is very much, yeah, and I think that was the exact right choice. This is set about 100 years before the events of the Phantom Menace, and yeah, it's a time we haven't seen very much in canon. Like, as far as I understand, some of the stuff that's now considered legends used to be, yeah, it used to be canon, and as far as I understand, a chunk of that was set during this period, and some of that they do put in this show. But yeah, there's room for it to be. I don't think they would have been able to do quite this noir of an approach if this was like 10 years before Phantom Menace. It would have conflicted with the approach of the prequel trilogy. I've seen some people say that this violates canon. I've yet to see a good argument for how that is. Like, I've seen some people say, oh, this, and this, and, you know, then if you watch a few more episodes, it's like, no, it's explained before the end of the season. And I would say it adds very interesting things to the canon. Yeah, the production is good, sometimes really great, sometimes amazing. The action scenes tend to be really, really stunning looking. And the wuxia inspiration, you know, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, there's some Matrix kind of, you know, yeah. And it delivers some action scenes, the likes of which we've never seen in live action Star Wars before, at least canon stuff. I wouldn't know about fan films and such. Yeah, the cinematography and editing tend to be, you know, they're never less than pretty good, and at times they're outright great. There's some really, really impactful cuts and some just camera work that's just fantastic. Yeah, there are times where it does, you know, it is, it doesn't always go quite as daring. The characters are just interesting enough. I'm not the first person to point out, you know, they're not all the most dynamic or you know, incredibly, some of them are not super well developed. I think an argument could be made that there's maybe a few too many characters, but there's not a single character that's like a Jar Jar Binks, someone that was just like, you know, can't stand them. Yeah, I think I will just briefly talk about, so if this really is the only season we get, it is a full story. You know, I was a little worried if they were going to be able to, but the season 1 finale works as a series finale. It wraps up everything it absolutely needs to. And at the same time, it does also leave enough room. I could 100%, I could easily see how they can make more seasons of this show. That might more or less cover. I wouldn't really say that the show has a huge problem with filler. There is maybe a little bit of stuff where it's like, okay, they didn't really need to. Yeah. Let's see. I think that might cover all that I had to. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Yes. I feel like there's something else that I really wanted to say. Right. One thing, you know, I would very much like to see official canon Star Wars go post Jedi. I think that would be very interesting. I think they've done a decent job recently with stuff that was interesting. But yeah, and the show has a lot of focus on Jedi. One of the main things that I think is important when you have this much focus on Jedi, you know, you got to make them more interesting, because if you're just going over these are the rules, you know, and that's something I think the prequel trilogy had some problems with, focusing a lot on Jedi, and we end up with just a lot of people who don't show that much emotion, and kind of, you know, they follow the rules a lot, and then at times they suddenly break the rules in ways that feel incongruous to their characters. Here, they make them interesting, in part with the moral grays, and just, yeah, contrasting the Jedi against something else, which I'm not going to give away in this video. I will talk some about the acting. Amanda Stenberg continues to impress tremendously. I have not watched everything she's done. I would like to. But yeah, you know, if you know her from nothing else, you maybe know her as Rue from Hunger Games. She was also just amazing in The Hate U Give. And yeah, here again, fantastic job. They really put her through the ringer. She has to display a lot of complex emotion, and she 100% rises to the challenge. I think that might be about. Yeah. Some of the action shows us stuff we've never seen before. I already mentioned that there's some wuxia inspiration, but there's a couple of other things that, like, just, yeah. This has some of the best action, some of the best lightsaber action that I've seen in any official Star Wars thing, canon thing. Some of the action doesn't really lead to anything. There's a non-zero amount of times where there'll be, like, some tension and excitement and action, and then, like, a few scenes later, the thing that seemed like, oh, you're going there, that's interesting, and then they just pull it back. You know, that it is one of those things. I'm not 100% certain if the writers chose that there were 8 episodes in this season. I could imagine that if it had been completely up to them, they might have gone for 7 or even just 6. Again, I don't think the show has a huge problem with filler, but there are times. Yeah, without spoiling anything, there was at least one time where I and a number of other fans vocal here on YouTube were like, these characters sure are spending time walking from one place to another, you know, and, like, I think they did a good job of filling that time with conversations, dialogue that was really, really interesting. But yeah, I think it would have been, you know, if they had gotten to choose, yeah, I think it could have been more tightly paced. But there's no one episode that I would say just skip. There's something really important in every single episode. That might be about what I have to say. So I'm just briefly going to give you my ranking of the Star Wars live-action shows. So from worst to best, The Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka, The Acolyte, and The Mandalorian. And The Book of Boba Fett is probably the one, like, honestly, overall, there's something I love about each of these. I would say that The Book of Boba Fett is the one that I come the closest to. Yeah, I'm not sure I would say I love the show as a whole. I love chunks of that show. And Obi-Wan Kenobi also definitely has some issues. These others I do love. Some reservations for each. Yeah, you know what? I'll just briefly. Yeah, this one is nowhere near as like repetitive as Obi-Wan Kenobi was, and it does not spend a really, really long time with fairly little of consequence happening, like the Book of Boba Fett. Yeah, I would also say the overall, like, compared to Ahsoka, that one also spent a little too long, maybe also in part because Ahsoka was delivering something that, you know, I only got to watch Rebels fairly recently, but, you know, some people watched it back when, you know, if you watched it back when it originally aired, you know, let's see, it ended in 2018, and then Ahsoka, was that like 2022, I want to say, and, or was it 23? You know what, I'm just very, very quickly gonna find the, okay, so Ahsoka, oh, that, yeah, okay, Ahsoka was last year, 2023. That's 5 years wait. And then they take that long to deliver on what people have been waiting for. And it is, I get, it's a lose-lose situation, because if they open with delivering what people have been waiting 5 years for, then it's also like, you really don't want to build up on your own, but I do think they took too long. And yeah, overall, Mandalorian is better than this. You know, Mandalorian makes very few mistakes, and I just realized, I don't know how, and I'm very sorry, I did manage to forget to include Andor on there. I don't know how that happened. Andor is my absolute favorite. And that is, you know, this show does not go quite as far into the grime and the grit as Andor does. You know, it's a baby Andor. It's taking steps towards that. It does have more frequent action than Andor. Yeah, I feel like is there anything at all missing? Yeah, there's a good amount of diversity on display, and, you know, I think that by itself is good. We should strive towards that, but it does also actually use it. Some of the characters that were cast using minorities, some of them are like already like on the page. Even if you look away from the casting, they are representative of real life minorities, of real life minority experiences. There's some very salient commentary on some LGBTQ plus issues, and that's as much as I can say without spoiling anything. Yeah, some minority experiences are very well handled, and because there is so many, you know, minority cast members, that also means that at least some of the cast members that are not white cis men, some of them end up saying and doing things that are very morally gray. Let's stick with gray, and sometimes going past gray. And I do think it is very important to acknowledge it is possible to do something wrong, even if you aren't a white cishet man. And I'm not saying that just because I am a white cishet man, but we need to... One of the big things is that if you have people who, out of goodness, who believe that every single minority, is incapable of ever doing anything wrong. Like, the one thing we need to keep in mind is the more power you have, the more the things you do wrong matter. If a tech billionaire... When a tech billionaire does something horrible, it hurts way more people than when, someone who has almost no power, which is not only true of minorities, but they have, they have even less power. They have less privileges. Yeah. With that said, it is possible for members of minority groups, communities, to make mistakes. And when you have people, to get back to my point, when you have people who think, oh, minorities are just incapable of doing anything wrong, the moment they see that they become aware, sometimes minorities do something wrong, then they might overreact in the opposite direction and be like, well, I've been lied to. I thought that they never did anything wrong. If they do things wrong, maybe they do deserve the things that the majority does to them, which is, of course, not an accurate statement at all. But yeah, we got to get away from the perfect victim stereotype, because nobody is a perfect victim. So yeah, I really appreciate, and yeah, the show is very clear on when someone does something wrong, it matters more if that person has a lot of power than if they do not, including if this person who has a lot of power is technically a member of one or more minority communities. You are not inherently good just because you're not part of the majority. You're also not automatically bad. That's the biggest thing we have to fight back against, is the perception that minorities are inherently lesser than the majority. But it is extremely important to also acknowledge. And we had a while where Hollywood put out stuff that was like, no, African Americans are saints, and these various things. We've gotten to a place where it's okay to acknowledge they can also make mistakes. The important thing is we don't end up communicating the propagandistic idea that everything they do is wrong because they're minorities. I think that might be about what I had to say. Oh, right. Apparently some people freaked out about fire in space. Pillar of Garbage, fellow YouTuber, did a fantastic job addressing that. I'm just watch his video. I think he does spoil the first episode, but I don't think he spoils anything after that. But yeah, if you watch the first episode and you feel yourself just taken aback at how can there be fire in space in Star Wars, watch his video. It's great. Yeah. Honestly, this is 8 Acolytes out of 10. And yeah, I hope they make more seasons. Right. Please ignore the low ratings that the show as a whole, and at least a bunch of the episodes, have gotten on IMDb. Like, clearly a lot of these people just went into it wanting to hate it. Like, if you watch just one episode of this, and if you have Disney Plus already, that's just time spent, The episodes are around 30 minutes. If you watch just the first episode, and you truly are not at all interested in anything that episode sets up, yeah, the show just might not be for you. But, me and quite a few others watched that and were like, okay, I gotta find out what's going on here. Actually, yeah, just briefly. So the show has some mysteries. It does not go into all of them in great detail, but then that's also, if there's more seasons, I would argue, I can ultimately I can only speak for myself, but personally, I felt satisfied with how the mysteries, the setup, the slow drip feed of information, and where we are on how much we know by the end of this season. If they don't make more seasons, I feel like I've been told of a full. This is not like if you stop watching Lost part way through, you know, where you're gonna find yourself thinking like that wasn't at all enough. I still there's still so many mysteries that I really wanted to find out the answers to, as opposed to if you watch all of Lost, in which case you're just going to be left thinking, you know what, the answer I came up with in my head was actually